Once there were two very different brothers who lived in the village of Ambra, in a long-forgotten land called Naples, which was in the south of old Italy. The older brother, Timo, had lived all his 50 years with a condition the villagers called lock limb. It caused his arms to freeze up if he did much vigorous work with his hands, so, unlike his blacksmithing brother, he'd never been apprenticed. And their late father had left Timo out of the inheritance of all but a small hut behind the brother's childhood stone cottage. And poor old Timo lived alone, leaving daily to wander into the marsh in search of leeches to capture and sell for a meagre price to doctors and infirmaries. The villagers considered him nearly equal to a beggar, whether he begged or not. Rugo, on the other hand, had practically lived most of his 40 years in the forge, which was next door to the family's stone cottage under their father's supervision. And he'd married a lovely wife who'd given him a lovely daughter, but alas, only one child would Rugo have. On the day of her birth, he started complaining that she wasn't a boy, that the neighbors were like animals, loud and dumb, and about all sorts of petty things, really. At least his yammering was only on occasion, back in those days. A few years later, though, he started complaining round the clock, and on all days, including feast days, after his forge was robbed during a storm by the one man he'd ever taken as an apprentice, his wife's distant cousin. This thief brought two other thieves, and during one of the loudest and darkest storms ever to hit the soggy little village, the three cleaned out the forge of all its anvils, tongs, hammers, and iron cauldrons, even the moulds and stamping dies, as well as crates filled with iron brands and custom locks and keys, hinges for the chapel, just everything, the beautiful and hideous alike. Yes, they took everything and its soot away in 2 wagons as fast as they could along the higher land before the floods came spilling through the night. Well, in the meantime, lightning thrashed while the lake overflowed, and the villagers all sat in their houses in circles, kneeling in the draughts to pray beside their flashing candles and beneath their shaking roofs, terrified that God would judge the land. But he didn't. It was all okay when they woke in the morning. The earth and her greenest leaves were mud-ridden. The darkest cloud to remain over the sun was a damp grey. To the north the sky was as blue as wet paint, and the friendly village dogs were gathering in the streets again. Rugo, they say, vanished into the forge that morning, and from inside let out a scream so long and so loud that even the hobbling 90-year-old woman who lived across the path and seldom remembered her name went out to limp boldly across the road with her cooking knife, crying, "Murderers!" I knew I heard murderers hiding there in the night, and now they've sprung to the task, those cowards. But she couldn't get past the pack of friendly dogs, because she was so fond of giving them leftover gristle and hocks. Rugo was a large man, yet he bawled out loud on the spot as the other neighbors hurried over to see what was the matter. Oh, how he hissed, like iron that refused the mercy of water, unquenchable, seething, forged in fury. They've taken all, my life, my livelihood, and even the new church gates. Well, now Rugo would have to work in another field for a very long time before he could restore his shop. He was lucky to own his cottage, and a comfortable one it was, more sprawling than most in that village. His wife began sewing aprons for a miller or two and embroidering pillowcases for her generous neighbors, but alas, all the work ran out, and with it the last of the dried pasta and herbs. Soon Rugo, quite grumpy, went out back during a drizzle to beat on the door of his brother's hut. It creaked open with Timo hidden behind it, all but one eye. Rugo said, "Give us food." Timo brought out a sack of cabbages and potatoes, then asked Rugo in the hut, "You need work? It's been 5 months. Your house is getting emptier every day." "I know this," Rugo grumbled. "I can't bear to sell one more heirloom." Then, "Come work with me," Timo said kindly. "You?" Rugo stepped back, disgusted. "You are like a bottom dweller. Never." So after another month his wife went to stay at her parents' place with their daughter, because the two were hungry. Well, the three were really. So Rugo sat in that dark and empty cottage, complaining to God, the angels, a small frog, and anyone else who would listen. Finally, one evening, he gave in, went out to the marsh with his brother to learn to hunt leeches. The work was sloppy indeed. One would have to wade through filthy waters and stand still long enough to attract several leeches to his legs, then pluck them off and put them in a green glass fiasco, sealing its neck with a wax stopper. That's all there was to it. They say the leech catchers in that village took plenty of bergamot juice by the spoonful to keep death by malaria at bay. But Rugo wouldn't take advice about bergamot from his older brother. Instead he took the lead, grumbling, wading across the marsh. "If I had an heir to the forge," said he, while Timo held the lantern over his brother's shoulder, "then at least I'd have someone who could help me to restore the old forge, someone to travel with me to a big, busy village. We could work for 3 years, maybe 4, and get the forge going again." Timo stopped because Rugo stopped to turn and grumble straight into his brother's face, unaware there was a leech or two on his own face. "But now it'll take me 6 years to rebuild my business, and it's all your fault." "Mine?" Timo asked. "Yes," said Rugo, "for being born that-a-way. Unmarriageable. Brother is one heir too much to ask for." "I'm sorry," said poor Timo with a breath that could hardly lift his words to his brother's gurgling hot ears. Rugo plucked a leech from the corner of his mouth, popped it into the fiasco, then turned to wade on, Timo right behind him, lamp held high up. "So now I have to wade in malaria while letting out the empty forge house to travellers. If I'm lucky, I'll get 3 visits a month." "Well," said his brother, "I could still share my bergamot juice with you. Been taking it for decades. Never been sick since I started on it." "I hate bergamot." After they caught a good 10 fiascos full of marsh water and leeches, they took one horse home and went to each their beds without a word. In the morning they set out to sell the leeches, both on one horse again. As they neared the church, going uphill, Timo started to whistle. Rugo pulled the reins and asked, "Now, what are you whistling about?" "Nothing. I just always whistle." "Well, no whistling when I'm driving this horse." "But it's my horse," he grumbled. "It might as well be mine. After all the times I've fed you supper." Well, it wasn't quite supper, not what the household was having, no. It was really just the leftovers that had started to turn from a week or so before. But Timo said nothing, stopped whistling. By the time the men travelled through the next village, the clouds had rolled in. But they promptly went to see the doctor in his fine little brick establishment, with its modest sign and wood-grain waiting room that hosted some wonderfully vine-shaped carving that jutted from long wall benches in chunks of oaken acorns, their seats masterfully upholstered, or so I'd imagine. Though I can't say magazines were splayed out. No, not seeing that. Maybe a quite expensive large Bible that clients knew they weren't supposed to touch. Probably also well upholstered. Well, at this point, maybe the walls were upholstered too, and the doctor's shoes, and who knows what else. Well, The one and only doctor there greeted Timo by saying, "Hello, Timo, and who have we here today?" Timo said, "This is my younger brother," but before he could finish, Rugo took a step toward the old doctor with his hand out for a shake. And the doctor, who almost never shook the hands of leech hunters, they say, felt compelled to shake Rugo's grip, only because of the strangely commanding way Rugo looked at him, with his head lowered as though trying to meet the old doctor with some puzzling sort of authority. So, with this dark gaze, he introduced himself, and almost too loudly for the doctor's taste in people, saying, "Signore Rugo." "Oh," the doctor said after the shake, "then you must be stepbrothers." Rugo grumbled, "We are not." "Then," the doctor asked, "why is your last name Rugo, while his is not?" "My first name is Rugo." "Then," the doctor chuckled, "you'll be simply Rugo to me, not Signore." "Sir, I am a blacksmith and a fine smith by trade. I am addressed in my village as Signore Rugo." Well, he was also known in his village to be just this pretentious, so Timo turned away to admire the upholstery for a moment. The doctor, they say, developed a twitch of the eye as he tightened his smile into a set of absurdly pursed lips to keep from laughing, simply because in those days no man used his first name in conjunction with Signore, except for the upper class, and only at casual gatherings on top of it. As softly as velvet, this upholstered old doctor— "Oh, sorry, I meant this upstanding old doctor," wheezed out every word to keep from laughing at the little social blunder, saying, "Then, as Signore Rugo, the smith, you shall be known to me." The doctor paid the brothers for their many leeches, had them pour the goods into a copper tub in the back, then bid them a good day. But as they headed for the door, the doctor called to Rugo, "Signore, the ones on your neck, please." So Timo peeled those leeches away, then carried them to the copper tub. And now, with dark dashes on their skin and sacks clacking of empty fiascos, the brothers left. During the next year, Rugo's wife returned home to run the Forge House Inn, which was doing better than expected, so Rugo didn't have to rely on the unfamiliar trade of his seasoned brother anymore. And by the third year after the theft, he'd bought most of his heirlooms back and collected 30% of the equipment required for a successful smithing shop. But he didn't join his wife in prayers of thanks on their nippy walk to church, nor did he help to feed any of the village's widows or orphans, not that he ever had. Instead, he started telling them that they should all just get married and get a job. Rugo had grown fond of saying to the less fortunate ones, "You could go into business for yourselves catching leeches. It's easy work. They hardly weigh an ounce. Anyone can do it." Well, he'd said this outside of church after Mass one Sabbath, and the parishioners all heard him, so proceeded to walk away as he stood there on holy ground, announcing to them all that he needed help with a loan. "So that I can buy my cauldrons and new moulds, then I can start working again, unlike the beggars around here," he said. But the half-dozen men who could have handled such a loan folded themselves into the light foot traffic there. They strolled stiffly past Rugo and his embarrassed wife, yes, all turned just so, to keep that jabbering old Rugo from looking them in the eyes, as he gushed in the baritone of his late father, "Please, I like to work. You must think I'm blessed in the eyes of St. Ampelio." Though it seems that no one there had ever heard of St. Ampelio, patron saint of blacksmiths, simply because he wasn't a local saint. So they kept walking in silence from Rugo, who only went on, "Mamma mia! Don't shun me. I am beloved by my saint. I earn my every coin, and you love rotten beggars more than me, do you? I should be the most loved around here, me." A few rolled away in their wagons. Some paused on that long stone walk, which had stones that matched the church's steeple. But even these few didn't turn more than an ear, and only out of sheer curiosity. He said, "Listen to me. You all need new pizza pans, sturdy stoves, and good heavy spatulas. I'll make what you need. And the shoes of your horses, they sound not like a clip-clop when they walk on the grass, but like a clank-clink. I'm telling you, the fit is wrong. And if you don't give me a loan, then I hope the shoes fall off all the hooves in the street and trip the widows." An angry spectator couldn't hold her steps back any more, so stormed over in her Sunday veil, pointing a finger at Rugo to say, "Signore, how dare you ask someone to help you live, when you stand here and tell the orphans and the frail old ladies to go catch leeches if they want to eat?" "Oh, they say she was so infuriated that you could see her finger trembling like the narrow snout of one of those hunting breeds held back on chains, before her entire hand broke loose from her restraint and whipped the man across the cheeks, left and right and right and left." Afterward he looked stunned, some say so stunned that his limbs went limp. There he stood, looking almost reverent, they say, in awe as he stared into the sky. And it was this lost gaze that led the angry woman to carefully turn as she whispered the name of Jesu Christo, squinting to see past the clouds, because she thought the Christ had finally come down. No such luck. The man was simply jolted stiff by the good slapping. Well, that woman stormed off, and now Rugo's wife was in tears, whispering, "Everyone hates us. You have done nothing but complain and withhold mercy ever since you hired that sneaky thief." As they walked arm in arm, he whispered back, "It's Timo's fault. He said he had a dream that I would never complain again if I took your estranged cousin in as my apprentice, gave him a key to the forge." "Poor Timo, you blame him for everything," she said, taking their daughter by the hand. "You forget." "I don't forget," he said. You do forget, Rugo. You forget how to love and how to be happy, how to be thankful, how to be generous. It's not natural, this way that you are." Then with her little girl, she stormed off. Rugo finally made it home an hour later, and as always lately, didn't care to eat his wife's Sunday spaghetti or anything she'd cooked in the last months. He couldn't get his mind off that loan no one would give him, or that cauldron and those moulds. So he went on doing as he'd done for the last several months, plopping down on the front steps, complaining, alone, skipping supper, forgetting to sleep, withholding admiration and affection from his wife, who hadn't had as much as a back pat from him, much less a real hug. It seemed these days that as long as his lips moved, they said things like, "Foolish old travellers with their goats and rabbits, they've smelled up my forge house. They eat too much, always asking for wine or milk. I say water is enough. I haven't eaten as much as an herb in 3 days, and I'm strong as an ox, I am. Why can't they stay in the forge house satisfied with the fire and the well, and the hay beds with the clean woolens? Instead they ask for too much, making my wife mend and wash their clothes. And me, I have to buy the mending kits, and smell their traveller's stench. What do they take us for? And these shepherds," he said, as a herd of sheep went grazing by in the distance, bleeping and baying. "They come by at all hours. No wonder I never sleep any more." Day in and day out these days his wife had to listen to him complain more than he ever had. But at least she got her sleep. Well, when she woke the next morning, Rugo was still sitting outside on the steps, blabbering to himself, hunched over, plucking up the grassy blades between his toes. She said, I had a dream. Why tell me about it? He asked. It was about you, Rugo. So, am I going to die? He didn't look at her, his arms tangled over his legs, plucking the grass from his seat on the steps. I'm not sure what it means. She was bitter, naturally, but went on faithfully, saying, You were holding a tiny vial. He was unshaven, said, Wasn't me, plucking faster at the grass. Are you secretly plotting to poison me? Don't be ridiculous, you sound like your mother. At that she slung the hot tea from her cup at his back, and he leapt up, screaming, Hot! That's hot, woman. Well, Rugo, it won't kill you, because it isn't poisoned. Or is it? I tell you, she pointed with a sizzling stare. You carried some sort of amber glass vial. Now, why would you do that? He turned to face her. Go and ask the angel who gave you the dream, he grumbled, his dripping back steaming like a kettle in that cool air. Cool air makes steam more pronounced in certain climates. I've seen it myself. Well, the guests from the inn were walking toward them, so, embarrassed of her unfriendly husband, she stepped inside, slammed the door, leaving Rugo to gripe at the heavens, arms out to the clouds. Look at me, he said, for clearly, Father of Christ, I am the devil here, am I not? The guests stopped meters away, signed the cross as the quick and trembling. Then they all turned back, mumbling. Said one, He is the devil himself. Oh, and I knew it. The next one said, I'll bet his back erupted in flames before his wife, so she had to throw cold water on him. And yet he steams in thick plumes like that. The last one whispered, Can you smell the smell of the devil scorned? I fear it's enough to possess us straight through the nostrils. And at that all three dribbled of endless whimpers as they ran to their horses, leaving without any of their belongings, or their goats, or even their wagon. Inside, his wife was praying in every language she knew, saying, Please make my ears deaf to his constant complaining, and my eyes blind to his obsessive starving bones. What has become of the old Rugo, who only complained about everything, but not all the time? He is obsessed with complaining. Oh, Father, I fear he has stirred my soul insane. In the meantime, Timo was on his way back from catching leeches when he saw a mysterious wagon, but there was no driver, and the reins dragged the ground as its horses meandered around bends of the path, as if guided perfectly by the spirits to stay on the road. When he got home, Timo pointed south and said to his brother on the steps, A wagon drifts without a driver. But Rugo squawked, saying, You have leech poisoning, you fool. Go to your hut and take some bergamot. Well, Timo said no more and walked away with his filled fiascos. Though he wasn't the only one to see the strange wagon. Others in the village brought news of it, saying that a gypsy wagon was driving itself under the power of demons. But others said it was heavenly spirits, and still others said, She is the one, the old gypsy from the north. Now, as for me, I've read somewhere they were meant to be Egyptian, the gypsies, but this woman, well, I've heard she was Roma. I wouldn't know, since I think this tale is 300 years old. Yes, I'm pretty sure it is. And I'm only 2/3 of a century myself. I don't mind telling. So, where was I? Oh yes, these others who said she was from the north went on, gathered in the chill of day. One whispered, Nay, it's not what they say, for that one travels between the fogs, has dreams of the suffering. Then she brings her bag of gifts to give them a magical present. Another whispered back, Then someone here in our village must be suffering deeply. I wonder who it is. Well, Rugo's wife heard this and went to Timo's open door, saying to him, "Poor old Timo, tell me, are you the one who suffers deeply enough for the gypsy of gifts to dream about you?" "Me? No," he laughed. "But you are so often in need, and Rugo is not nice to you. But I am safe. I never really starve. I have no wife to badger me, and no child to lose to tragedy. And every day I remember how the grass feels between my toes, how the rain feels on my shoulders. And I'm helping to heal the sick by catching leeches." He took a bite from a buttery loaf. And thank you for the hot, fresh bread." She smiled. "Oh, you poor Timo, you are too content, though I'm glad to hear it. I have always wondered. I didn't want to pry, though," she said, leaving his earthy doorstep as it began to drizzle, and he called out, "By the way, I've caught twice the leeches today. I'll fetch a nice payment." "Oh, how wonderful for you, Timo," she said, hurrying back to the stone cottage. After dark, when everyone in the village was safe and sound in their warm, dry beds, and the drizzling stopped, Rugo wandered off with a lantern, absent-minded, complaining to the few stars he saw between the clouds, saying, "And now I have 9 goats to clean up after, because if I send my useless wife to do it, she'll just throw hot tea on the droppings and curse them all to hell." Well, let's catch up to part 2, folks.